We all know it. Walked it every day. But none of them were like these. The world's most dangerous ways to school. Climbing, freezing, paddling for hours, all for the chance of a better life. Risky, spectacular, and sometimes just simply beautiful. The most dangerous ways to school. Peru, Lake Titicaca, 3,800 meters above sea level, the world's greatest mountain lake. On this lake, 2 schools where children learn and fight for their dreams. But the way to school leads across infinite water, and even the smallest children have to cope on their own. Almost daily, up to 4 hours of paddling and trudging through reeds, always battling with nature, on one of the world's most dangerous ways to school. Five o'clock. The first rays of the sun break through the clouds above Lake Titicaca, Peru. A new day is dawning. A few miles away from the mainland, somewhat hidden between huge fields of totora reeds, about 50 families of the Uru clan, the native inhabitants of Lake Titicaca, live together in a village community of floating reed islands. On each lives one family. At the first break of dawn, the 9-year-old Mariela and her little sister Belinda get up. Still a bit drowsy, they put on their traditional school uniform all by themselves. Their parents are out fishing. The elder siblings work on the mainland. Especially important, hair care. Every morning, the sisters copiously comb their hair and then braid it. That's what the Indian tradition demands. Because hair signifies strength, beauty, and life in the Uru culture, it needs special attention. On the other side of the village, something stirs too. 4-year-old Harold is an early bird. After all, kindergarten is waiting. But the morning wash with cold lake water is not one of his favorite pastimes. The children's colorful hats are not only part of the traditional clothing, but also offer protection against the aggressive sun in this high mountain region. Far away from the village, a 3-hour-long boat ride from the mainland, 11-year-old Vidal and his family also get up at the break of dawn. They live on a tiny isolated island in the midst of the world's greatest mountain lake. But before Vidal can brace himself for his dangerous way to school, he must take care of his family's sustenance. Like every morning, he checks the fishing nets. Vidal has built his boat himself, which, like almost everything else on this lake, is made of reeds. The water is only 2 meters deep here. The 11-year-old pushes the boat forward with a long wooden stick. For centuries, this is how the Uros have been calmly navigating the lake. Especially in wintertime with its frosty temperatures, fishing is a tough job on a lake which lies 3,800 meters above sea level. By tradition, Vidal stands in for his father, who at this time of day is busy with other tasks. Due to the increasing water pollution over the past few years, the yield hasn't improved. Vidal is all the more delighted if he finds something in the net.
I like fishing a lot. Because then we could eat the fish. If something is left in the basket, my mother can trade it for something else on the mainland.
After work, it's time for the well-deserved refreshment. The cooking and eating is done outdoors. Vidal's mom prepares breakfast for the family of 8. She bakes traditional Uru bread. Their whole life takes place on a 30-square-meter island with 2 little reed huts. None of the children have a room of their own. Vidal braces himself with reed blossom tea. He will need a lot of strength today. Because Lake Titicaca, with a total area of almost 8,300 square kilometers, which he has to cross on his way to school, is the largest navigable lake in the world. At 6:30, Vidal sets off on his adventurous journey to the Uros State Primary School. 2 hours lie ahead of him, across the Great Lake, all by himself. Two hours to get there. And another 2 hours coming back in the afternoon. Since Vidal turned 8, he paddles to school on this long journey. It makes his mother Paulina nervous to see him vanish on the infinite lake.
I'm very concerned when he sets off. What happens if he keels over? I don't even want to think about it.
Most Uru children go together with a number of others in larger boats, so they can take turns. Vidal lives so far off that he has to go by himself. But he has a goal.
I really want to study. That's why I travel so far.
Slowly, Vidal pushes the boat forward. He has to ration his strength. The punting with a long wooden rod is the most efficient and at the same time least tiring method to make way. But still, it forces him to go to his limit. It's a long way, especially for an 11-year-old. A few kilometers away, in the Uru village, the 9-year-old Mariela and her little sister Belinda are still busy tying colorful woolen pompons to their braids. Only then are the girls ready to go. Mariela likes going to school because she too has a dream.
I want to study medicine.
That's why the 9-year-old takes on such a tough way to school. At 7 a.m., she and her sister Belinda row off. An hour across the Great Lake lies ahead of the girls before they reach the private primary school.
I'm afraid they might fall into the water. It has happened to Belinda. Luckily, Mariela was able to save her. I thank heaven for that.
But she is left with no choice than to let them go on their own. She and her husband have to work. Mariela's way stretches right through the village, which is traversed by many bigger and smaller waterways. 60 minutes of rowing, tiring for the 9-year-old, but also the daily routine. Her sister Belinda is lucky. Being younger, she gets to enjoy the boat ride. Mariella, being the older, had to take it on at an early age.
I didn't know how to row. My mother taught me when I was about 5 years old. In the beginning, it was difficult. But when I turned 6, it started to become easier.
The 11-year-old Vidal also learnt rowing at an early age. Most of the time, he is far out on the lake, completely by himself, on his traditional reed boat.
I like my boat because it is so easy to handle. To build it, we first dry the reeds. Then we waddle the boat by weaving the 2 broad middle parts with the smaller parts that are used for the edge, and tie them together with nylon cords. To help the boat to float, we put empty plastic bottles in the middle part. To build the boat, it takes me about 2 to 3 days.
The 11-year-old is used to being on his own when he's underway. Only the men working in the reeds cross his way from time to time. Today, he took a route leading him past his father, Carlos, so they can say good morning to each other. Since the break of dawn, the 40-year-old harvests the totora reed. With a sort of sieve, he cuts the stems just above the root and drags them into piles. He wants to use the new harvest for the expansion of the island, only one of the many ways to use the reed on Lake Titicaca.
For us on the lake, totora means life. We build our boats, our houses, our islands with it. We even eat it. We use totora for everything in our lives.
With his harvest, Carlos returns to his family island. The fresh reed provides the basis for the continuance of the family-owned island. Once a week, Carlos must do some repair work on their floating home, because the islands are fragile structures. The Uru are the only inhabitants living on Lake Titicaca. After battles with other tribes, they built their floating islands of reed, and with these, they fled onto the lake. In case of danger, they could move on along with their island whenever they wanted to. The islands float even to this day. The reed of which they consist rots from underneath, and the rising foul gases keep the construction afloat. Today, the Urus are more or less settled and have made themselves at home on their bobbing islands. Still, almost everything is made of reeds. People live off the things the lake offers them. Fishing has always been the Urus' main source of income. Since they are a people of the water, they own no land to grow fruit or vegetables, and therefore have to trade a large part of their catch for other food at the lakeside. Vidal's father Carlos also lives off fishing and built the island from reeds, as is the custom. Since it rots from underneath, Carlos has to pile up a fresh layer of totora again and again to prevent his family from getting wet. But it's a race against time. After 3 years, repair work doesn't suffice anymore, and Carlos builds a whole new island. Vidal's father observes the sky. The dark clouds above the mountains worry him. The weather quickly veers over the huge lake, and that signifies danger for his son.
If clouds like these appear, I always get a bit nervous. But the real problem is not the rain, it's the wind.
Because the wind causes waves. And for Vidal and his little boat, that doesn't mean ideal conditions. The change of weather normally happens around midday. These are the forebodings. A few miles away in the Uru village, 9-year-old Mariela and her sister Belinda are rowing towards school. It's windy here too, but the many islands provide cover, and so the water is calmer.
If it's very windy, it becomes exhausting. Sometimes the wind is so strong, it blows me away and I drift off.
Due to its size and location, Lake Titicaca is unpredictable. It lies on a high plateau between the Andes Mountains at a height of 3,821 meters. Allegedly, the cradle of the legendary Inca civilization is to be found in the lake. According to legend, the gods created the first Incas here. They rose from the bottom of the lake. For many, a magical place. Today, only the many ruins of temples testify to the existence of the ancient high civilization of South America. Mariela makes a stop on her way to school. After all, the lake offers the students a special delicacy. The so-called chulio is the Uru children's favorite food and can be found in the white insides of the totora reed. Mariela and Belinda peel the reed and enjoy the fruit pulp. The children love chulio because it tastes slightly sweet. It contains many important minerals and also bleaches teeth. The reason why the Inca's offspring often have this sparkling white smile.
I like the chulio from a reed. It's so yummy because it's sweet. It also gives me strength so I can row.
Vidal, too, takes a detour into one of the reed fields on his way to school. He, however, rows really deep into the closely intertwined totora reed. He's looking for nesting water birds, which he wants to bait. Only those like Vidal, who are very familiar with the reed, find their way. Many have gone astray. It takes a lot of effort, even if one knows the place. Sometimes the 11-year-old gets stuck, even with his narrow boat. He tries to free himself by rocking the boat with his feet. Finally, Vidal spots a nest full of fresh eggs.
When I go looking for nests, I just go into the reed by instinct and keep searching.
But Vidal is not really interested in the eggs. His plan? He wants to catch the parents. They are the only source of meat for the Uros, and therefore especially precious. Only if Vidal catches something will his family have a meal other than fish for a change. The ducks are supposed to get caught in these nylon snares. Carefully, Vidal puts the eggs back into their nest. The parents will only return if the clutch is full. On his way back from school, Vidal will check his trap. Freshly invigorated, Mariela and Belinda continue their way to school. Since the Uros always help one another, a little stopover is also on the agenda today. The girls pick up 4-year-old Harold and row him across to his kindergarten. In the village community, the older children often collect younger ones and thus share the ride. Quite some responsibility for a 9-year-old. Especially since they are now on the busy main channel of the village, with plenty of traffic.
I'm worried when Harold goes with the girls. What happens if he falls in or an accident occurs? There's so much traffic in the morning. That's why I try and bring him as often as possible myself.
Harold doesn't know how to swim. Most children learn to swim in school. Mariela rows as careful as possible. A couple of times she almost collided with other boats. More and more Uros in the village own fast motorboats. The children with their wooden punts barely stand a chance.
I'm afraid of a collision because we will instantly sink.
Mariela has made it through the busy traffic and safely delivers Harold at his kindergarten island. The girls wait till the 4-year-old has safely reached the building. Per year, on an average, 3 little children drown in the village, falling off the island while playing. Then the girls move on. At all costs, they want to reach school, which lies at the far end of the village, long before the actual lessons start. Meanwhile, Vidal has been on his way for 1.5 hours now. His way to school leads him across the fields of reed, which in some places is traversed by fully fledged waterway networks.
I never get lost in the reed. I simply use the sun for my orientation.
And so the 11-year-old continues to cut his way through the many canals in the reed, undeterred by more than 90 minutes of his tiring way. After a good hour, Mariela has nearly made it. She and her sisters safely arrived at the private primary school. Fellow students from all over arrive in dribs and drabs. This is the best moment of the whole day for Mariela, because here at school, she meets her girlfriends, can let go of her responsibility as an older sister, and simply be a child again. A whole hour before school starts, the girls meet because they've got something to do before the serious side of life begins. Every morning, before school, they practice swimming together. The fact that the water is only 12 degrees Celsius only bothers Mariela and her friends in the beginning. But the merry splashing around has a serious background. Learning how to swim is essential for the children's survival on the lake. But they don't have proper sports lessons where they would get competent instructions. After half an hour, the 9-year-old has had enough of the cold water for the time being. Finally, Vidal has also almost made it. The state primary school is in sight. He has been on his way for a good 2 hours now and is tired, but also happy to finally be there and meet his friends. The children arrive from all sides. Some are delivered by their parents. Others have shared a reed boat standing up because they only had a short way to school. A quick spit bath in the lake, and then it's time to finally enter the schoolyard. The first steps in more than 2 hours for Vidal. And although his way to school is so tiring, he's glad he's able to be here.
Here, I could have fun and be with my friends.
Whether Reed Island or not, just like everywhere else, the schoolyard is the place where children can charge around. It offers much more space than the islands at home. At last, the children can run around. But even if most of them have already had their fair share of sportiness, the delight in foolishly charging around is unaffected by it. The teachers' pets among them already peer around for their teachers and rush to their welcome. Vidal's teacher, Senora Condori, also has a long way to school. She comes from the mainland, and it took her 1.5 hours to get there, with a motorboat, however. At 9 o'clock sharp, the 40 students start lessons with a morning assembly. Vidal and his fellow students sing the Peruvian national anthem. Slightly out of tune, but always fervently. Off to the two classrooms. Two age groups are taught together in one classroom each, since there are only two teachers. Not the only handicap the state school has to deal with.
Many of my students come from faraway islands. For them, it is physically very tiring to row the boats, and often the children had little or no breakfast. So when they arrive, they're already very exhausted, which makes it harder for them to learn and to concentrate. That's why the level at this school is lower than the one in Puno, on the mainland, for example.
Nevertheless, the teachers try to bring their syllabus across. The timetable starts with math as first lesson. Even if boring for some, it's Vidal's favorite subject. He wants to become an engineer. It's geometry today. Senora Condori has to teach 3rd and 4th grade together, and always makes sure they all understand. Even in math, the ever-present reed plays a role. The pieces of totora are wonderfully suited to illustrate the polygons the teacher showed at the blackboard earlier on. A few miles away in the Uru village, the private primary school has also started at 9 o'clock sharp. Mariella's school is run by the religious community of Adventists. However, religious education plays a minor role. The teacher follows the ordinary national curriculum. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and geography are the main subjects. Right now, Mariella and her fellow students are struggling with Spanish syntax. Also in Vidal's school, it's time for Spanish lessons. As opposed to the population on the mainland, the Uros speak a distinct language of their own, the so-called Aymara. They have to learn Spanish from scratch.
For the children, it is very important to learn Spanish, because in the towns on the mainland like Puno and everywhere else, Spanish is spoken almost exclusively. The people speaking Aymara are often discriminated against, so I encourage the students to learn Spanish.
12 o'clock, break. Time for lunch. There is nothing to be bought on the school island, so all the mothers give their children something to eat to take along. Since some have more than others, the children share their food, so everyone gets what he likes. Vidal loves fish and rice. The girls prefer grilled beans, even if they are a bit stony. Whoever is thirsty afterwards simply serves himself from the lake, drinking with their own special technique. The teacher, Senora Condori, always checks the sky around noon, because here on the plateau there is often a sudden change of weather around 12 o'clock.
The biggest problems here are the thunderstorms and the wind. Especially in the afternoon, it's dangerous. Because just when our children head off for home, often we have a change of weather. If we see that the weather will worsen, we finish school early so the children can get home reasonably safe.
For the moment, the weather doesn't look too bad. But what it will be like when the children head back home, nobody knows. After half an hour, the break is over, and a Spanish test awaits them. Nothing escapes Senora Condori's stringent gaze, even if the children try to cheat a little. Spanish is not exactly Vidal's best class, and he is dragging behind a bit in the subject matter.
Vidal is a very active student. He takes part in everything, and being one of the older students, he even sometimes helps me teach the other students. But I worry about him, because at the moment, especially on Fridays, he often misses school. His parents want him to stay at home and help, because his older brothers have all left home already and have their own families. And so they often expect Vidal to lend a hand at home and help sustain the family. That's very difficult for him.
The tests are corrected immediately. As almost everywhere in the world, the girls are done first and are anxiously awaiting their results. Vidal and his desk neighbors are still struggling with the questions. For Vidal, the test is quite important. The last one, he flunked badly. This time, he at least got 14 out of 20 points. He can be proud of himself. At 2 p.m., school's over. After 5 hours of school, it's time to go back on the long and dangerous way home.
The way back is much harder because I am already tired, and often the wind is blowing in the afternoon.
All on his own again, Vidal rows towards his parents' isolated island. The weather seems to keep up. Mariella's school is over too. Depending on which direction they're heading to, the children share rides. Mariela and Belinda's island lies at the far end of the village. The two of them row home together, Vidal can't take the shortest route home. He wants to check the trap he set in the morning at the duck nests. Again, he navigates his little boat right into the totora reed. He has to concentrate in order to recover his snares in the midst of the infinite tangle of reed. But after a quarter of an hour right through the reed, he finds the nest with a dead duck inside.
It's important I catch something, because that's the only meat we have.
Vidal takes the remaining egg back home. He will hatch it at home. The sisters have picked up little Harold from kindergarten and bring him home on their way back. He may play the rest of the afternoon. Theoretically, Vidal only has half an hour left, but the wind has grown stronger, and he is unable to find protection in the canals. Like it or not, he has to cross the wide open space in order to get home. The 11-year-old struggles to keep balance.
I have to be careful. If I move too much, I could fall over.
Vidal is exhausted, but still has quite a long way to go. Because the village is close by, the water is calm where the girls are. Since 9-year-old Mariela has been rowing the whole time on the way there, it's now Belinda's turn. She is supposed to learn how to steer the boat by herself. Next year, Mariela will have finished primary school. The little one is already quite capable of the movement sequences, but she is careless and doesn't pay attention to the other boats. To Belinda, the whole thing seems like a game. She will have to practice a while before being allowed to row by herself. She's got half a year before she has to go on the water on her own, and Mariela is off to secondary school. It's extremely tiring to row against the wind and the waves, but Vidal must keep concentrating or else he will keel over. Water swashes into his reed boat. Again and again, he has to stop and bail it out. His arms burn, but it is already past 4 o'clock, and because the equator is so close, the sun goes down within half an hour. The student must not slow down. Finally, his home island comes to the fore. A moment that always liberates extra strength in Vidal.
As soon as I see our house, I know it's almost over. Just a bit more.
Shortly before sunset, Vidal reaches home after 2.5 hours, soaking wet. He was away for 10 hours. He doesn't arrive empty-handed. His catch means that his family can finally eat some meat after 10 days. But his mother, Paulina, takes only little interest in the duck. She is so pleased her son has made it across the huge lake unscathed.
I am always worried until he is back, and then I try and warm him up with a jacket and a warm soup.
Mariela and Belinda have also arrived safely at home in the village. Like good girls, they quickly do their homework. Mariela does math, and Belinda is drawing. Little Harold is put to bed by his mother. But also, he has to do some reading exercise before he goes to sleep, exhausted by a long day. Vidal and his family warm up by the fire in the last sunset light and are feeding the hatchlings. He knows why he endures his tough way to school.
I do this every day because otherwise I would not be able to study. I am lucky. My older brother couldn't go to secondary school. But my mother told me that I'll be allowed to study. And that just makes me happy.
We all know it. Walked it every day. But none of them were like these. The world's most dangerous ways to school. Freezing. Climbing. Risking their lives, all for the chance of a better future. Spectacular and sometimes simply beautiful. The world's most dangerous ways to school. The Yungas Valley in Bolivia, a unique landscape where the Andes Mountains meet the Amazon rainforest. In this remote section of one of the poorest countries in South America, education is not easily accessible. For the children of the jungle, it's the key to a new, better world. And that's why they run great risks every day in pursuit of it. Their only way to school leads over a ravine, over 650 feet deep. The children entrust their lives to a rusty iron pulley. Fear, hunger, and exhaustion are their constant companions. High up on the summit of the mountain range is where the Quispe family lives, isolated and in the heart of the jungle. It's 5 a.m. Up on the mountain, the school day begins especially early. 9-year-old Helen and 7-year-old Mariela have a long walk ahead of them, 2.5 hours. Of all the children who attend the school, the sisters live furthest away. The girls live in extreme poverty, as does 60% of Bolivia's rural population. But the hardest thing for them is their solitary life on the mountaintop. All their friends live down in the valley, and the long journey to school is exhausting and dangerous. Helen and Mariela dream of what it would be like to leave the mountain and their poverty behind.
I want to become a doctor.
Para curar los dientes.
To give people good teeth.
Vacunar.
Make them healthy.
Voy a cosechar.
I want my own farm
Y yo compro mi buzo.
and new things.
Y yo compro
I'd buy sweaters
mi
and
corto,
pants
mi media,
and socks.
mi chamarra.
The sisters are growing up without their father. He left them for a new family. Their mother, Lorenza, works various jobs as a day laborer. It's the only way she can feed her children. Lorenza herself only went to primary school, but she wants her girls to study as much and as long as possible. Education is their only way out of poverty.
I work all day and have hardly any time for the girls. It's terrible, but I can't do anything about it. I hope they have a good life, that they live in a nice house, find good husbands, and have happy families.
The girls know that a good education is their best chance for a life far removed from misery. And that it can open the door to a better future. It's 6 o'clock. School starts in 2.5 hours. Helen and Mariela have a long day ahead of them. The sisters call the first stage of their journey the Snake Hill. They've often seen the naka-naka, a species of coral snake in the high grass. The snakes are hard to spot, as most of them are only 7 to 12 inches long, and their venom makes them even more dangerous. It causes paralysis and can even lead to death.
We're afraid of the snakes here. We hit the grass with sticks to chase them away.
Helen and Mariela try to cross over the Snake Hill as quickly as possible. They know that if they were to get bitten up here on the mountain, help would arrive for them too late. Meanwhile, on the other side of the valley, the Rivero family are coca farmers, like so many people in the Yungas. This is the only region in Bolivia where it's legal to grow the plant. Seven-year-old Elmer and his 4-year-old brother, Porfirio, get to sleep in until 6:30.
Boys, it's time to get up.
Every morning, Elmer has to cross the gorge.
I wish I lived somewhere else, where you don't have to use a dangerous cable to go to school.
A finger-width steel cable leads from his house across the valley, a kind of homemade zipline. It's about 650 feet above the ground and already 30 years old. it's the only way to school. It takes a whole day to walk to the next bridge. Before going to school, Elmer has to help with the coca harvest. The moist, warm climate of the Yungas is also ideal for coffee and citrus fruit. But with coca, Elmer's family can make much more money. $280 a month, 5 times as much as Helen and Mariela's family.
What should I do?
Help me with the weeding.
According to Elmer's father, coca from the Yungas is not used to make cocaine. There is a tradition with coca leaves in Bolivia dating back centuries. People chew on them and make tea or medicine from them.
I don't want to become a coca farmer. It's a lot of work. I'd rather be an engineer and build houses. And I'd like to build a bridge here.
In a half hour, Elmer has to get going over the gorge. The sisters Helen and Mariela can breathe easy. They've made it over the Snake Hill. Now they're entering the thick forest. The girls have grown up in the jungle. They know its dangers, but also its tiny treasures. After walking for 3/4 of an hour, the sisters need a snack. They like the food at school best. There's often fruit and yogurt. But when they're really hungry, they eat what the forest provides. Sugarcane contains a sweet and sour fluid, albeit only one small sip for the long march.
Our dad taught us this. It's a plant you can chew.
It tastes like sugar when you chew it.
It's almost 7. The girls need to hurry up. They still have more than half the way to go. Meanwhile, Elmer and his little brother are starting off on their dangerous way to school.
Boys, don't forget your backpacks. Don't dawdle. And be careful.
It's a very special day for Elmer. Today, the 7-year-old will learn to fly. For the first time in his life, he will cross the gorge alone. A stone in the earth. That's all that's holding the homemade zipline in place. Four thin wires, about 1,000 feet across the valley. After 30 years, they're rather worn out, rusted, and sagging.
The police scare me the most. Sometimes I imagine them falling apart.
Once, Elmer broke his finger on the journey across the gorge.
It was really windy. I panicked and touched the cable. The wheel went over my finger.
Normally, Elmer goes across the gorge on his father's lap. Today, for the very first time, he'll hang from the steel cable, all alone.
Muy pesante. I'm old enough. And too heavy for my dad. I'll make it.
Elmer, I'll tie this tight. The rope needs to go up here, around your back. And the other one is for your feet, like a harness. Hold the knot here, and the bag here is like a seat. Make a knot like this.
Elmer's entire weight is now resting on the worn plastic bag. He could fall out at any moment. Several people from the region have already fallen to their death that way.
Don't touch the cable.
First, a test run. Elmer's father wants to see if his son will panic. Suddenly, a storm draws near. The sagging cable starts blowing in the wind.
When the wind is too strong, the pulley moves slower. You don't get enough speed to make it to the other side. With that much headwind, he could end up hanging in the middle. We have to be really careful with a storm like this. Lightning could strike the cable. Anyone on the zip line would get electrocuted.
Elmer's ride gets riskier every minute. Meanwhile, in La Paz, at 11,800 feet above sea level, it's the highest capital city in the world. This is where another long, formidable way to school starts, the teacher's journey. Every week, 63-year-old Angela commutes between two worlds, her home in the big city and her school in the jungle.
I do it all for the children. I want to help them learn.
Angela sets off with only the bare necessities in her bag. One of the most dangerous routes in the entire country lies ahead of her. Her first destination, the bus station in La Paz.
Good morning.
Angela's colleague, Luis, goes with her. Together, they run the school and teach the children.
Let's find a taxi.
How much?
70 bolivianos.
Maybe a bit less. No. Well, okay.
About $10 for a drive on one of the most dangerous routes in the world. That's a lot of money in Bolivia. The government covers the cost for the two teachers. On the way, they'll descend almost 10,000 feet from the highlands of the Andes to the edge of the Amazon basin. Angela, Luis, and the driver Carlos must cross the Andes. The route, unpredictable. Along crumbling rock faces and steep slopes. At 63, Angela actually could have retired long ago. But one thought drives her to take this risky route every week. She knows she can help the students make their way out of the jungle. The biggest danger lurks in the sky. A thick wall of fog descends on the mountains. Carlos, the driver, is tense. He's seen a lot of accidents on this road.
It's really dangerous with this much fog. You never know what's coming. There are often landslides and rocks fall on the street.
The most dangerous part of the route is yet to come. Many people have lost their lives here. Back to Helen and Mariela. They're relieved. Finally, they're going downhill for a short, safe stretch. In the afternoon, the sisters will have to hike back up the path they're running down now. When they get to school differs from day to day. The girls don't have a watch. At this waterfall, the girls know they've made it halfway. Helen and Mariela take a short break. The water has made the sharp stones slippery. Helen's old shoes are much too small for her, and her toes hurt.
We want to play in the water.
The girls enjoy the waterfall. At home on the mountain, there's only just enough rainwater for a quick wash. They can't afford to lose too much time. Otherwise, they'll get to school too late. Then, a lot more water comes down from above than the sisters would like.
We're getting all wet.
Here between the Andes and the Amazon, the weather can change within minutes. Helen and Mariela climb under a rock ledge. The girls don't know how long they'll be stranded here, or if they'll make it to school on time.
I'm ready.
Great.
On the other side of the valley, the rain has passed by. Elmer is ready for his first flight, alone on the steel cable. His father checks all the knots one last time.
We can't stay a father-son team forever. The time has come to let him go.
No estamos muy lejos de esas cosas.
Elmer's father, Porfirio, goes ahead. Elmer is right behind.
Keep going. Go, it's almost over. We're almost there.
By myself.
Soon you'll be flying over the gorge alone.
Done. This trip has buoyed Elmer's courage. He has overcome his fear of the steel cable. His brother, on the other hand, is still too young for this test.
I felt like a bird. I flew. It was really fast. I felt the wind, and I flew with the wind.
Elmer's little brother still rides over the gorge on his father's lap, tied on with only a piece of cloth. From here, the boys have to proceed on foot. The teachers, Angela and Luis, are approaching the most dangerous part of the drive to school. The dirt road leading toward the jungle. It descends nearly 10,000 feet over a distance of only 37 miles. The road, barely wider than the car itself. The driver stays as close as he can to the rock wall. On the other side, the road drops off 2,000 feet. Traffic coming from the opposite direction means mortal danger. In that case, the car must drive in reverse to one of the rare sections of road that are somewhat wider.
Each week, the journey is a real stress on me. It's very dangerous. I do it all for the children, so they can learn something.
Crosses remind the teachers of the constant danger. Several hundred people have gone off the road and plunged into the abyss. Many on this very curve. It drops off thousands of feet into a crater. Waterfalls from above fall directly onto the street. If the ground softens too much, it can give way under the weight of the car and carry those inside to certain death. Carlos drives the minivan very carefully along the cliff edge. Finally, it's over. The drive down one of the most dangerous roads in the world. Angela and Luis have a week of teaching ahead of them. During that time, they'll live at the school. In the heart of the Yungas jungle. There are two very simple bedrooms for the teachers, not to be compared with their apartments in the big city. Before opening the classrooms, they'll take a short rest. It's 7:45 a.m. School begins at 8:30. Helen and Mariela have made it through the jungle. The street in front of them leads to school. One more hour on foot. Time is running short. The girls have got to walk faster if they want to be on time. Meanwhile, the temperature has risen to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. The girls trudge wearily along the asphalt. They ought to be wide awake and especially careful, though, as the street has treacherous curves and is heavily traveled. The girls are slowly running out of energy.
We get tired when we walk so far. It's hot. We cool off now, and again in the puddles.
The school is still 2.5 miles away. To the girls, the road feels endless. After a half-mile walk, Elmer and his brother reach their destination. The Puente Armas School, in the middle of the valley. They're a couple of minutes early. The teachers are sleeping and haven't opened the doors yet. But that's no problem. On the contrary.
I like playing a bit before school starts. The soccer field is my favorite place.
Helen and little Mariela are out of energy. But then something truly unusual happens. An acquaintance of their mother spots the two girls on the side of the road. What luck! On the motorbike, they have a chance to get to school on time. To be sure, the streets here are also anything but harmless. But Helen and Mariela are simply happy that they don't have to walk. As long as they get to ride, they don't care about the traffic and the dust clouds. Done. The sisters are almost at their destination. They have rested their feet for a few minutes. A rare luxury. Now, school awaits them. They're happy for class to start, but also to finally see their friends again. These are the two most important things in the sisters' lives. Mariela is in one classroom with Elmer and his brother. Helen is in a second classroom.
Hi, Helen.
The older kids in the school are in her room. In total, 29 children attend the school, ranging in age from 4 to 13.
Line up.
The day begins with morning gymnastics. Time to march.
Hello, children.
Good morning, teacher.
Stand still.
Every Monday at the flag ceremony, the teachers announce the government's latest organizational plans. Today, for example, that the school will soon get a new classroom. In addition, Angela emphasizes how much the president supports the cause of the coca farmers. Then, the most important item on the agenda, the national anthem. The weekly ceremony is meant to teach the children discipline at an early age. Each week, one child is allowed to raise the flag. For the little ones, it's a big honor. Finally, after 45 minutes of standing at attention, class begins. There are 6 classes, but only 2 teachers and 2 rooms. So each room has 3 classes in it, and they all work on different subjects at the same time. In this room, art, Spanish, and nature studies. The first 6 years of school are free and technically compulsory, but especially in rural regions, many children have to work from an early age and thus skip school. Bolivia is the only country in the world in which child labor is legal starting at the age of 10.
What medicinal plants do you know? Think about it.
Amacay. You have to wash your hands after touching it.
What medicinal plant do you know, Daniel?
Coca.
Coca. What does it help with?
Stomach aches.
Then comes the students' favorite part of the day, lunch. The government pays for cookies, bananas, and chilled juice. It's a very special treat for the kids, as hardly any of the families own a refrigerator. For Mariela and Helen, this is often the best meal of the day. At home, they usually only get bread and tea. The family can't afford sweets at all.
I love lunch times. And afterwards, I play soccer with my friends.
The children are especially proud of their soccer jerseys, also a gift from the government. Each child gets an outfit with their name on it. It's usually the children's most expensive and favorite article of clothing. Luis teaches in the second classroom. Today's schedule includes social studies, religion, and math.
What's 4 times 14?
56.
Luis also teaches 3 classes simultaneously. Many of the students have to walk a long way to school, but no one walks as far as Helen and Mariela. And their walk home lasts even longer. That's why it's often hard for 9-year-old Helen to keep up with the other children. At home, she has little time to study for tests, but she works hard for her dream of one day becoming a doctor.
Very often the children are exhausted. Sometimes they fall asleep during class. Many children don't get home until late, especially Helen and Mariela. They usually don't manage to get their homework done.
The girls love their few hours at school. It's often the only time they have to just be children.
The way home is much more difficult. I'm tired from school, and we have to go uphill. At home, I help my mom, take care of my little brother, and I have to do the laundry.
2 p.m. School is over. While the other children wait for the rain shower to pass, Helen and Mariela head off as quickly as possible. They have to be home again before dark. Otherwise, they might get lost in the jungle. The way home is much more arduous than the way to school. Now, they've got to go uphill. Their one bit of comfort, the leaves of the thick forest shield them from the rain. The climb takes them 3 hours. The boys are also on their way back home. They have to hurry up because there's a special ritual at home tonight on the plantation. But 4-year-old Porfirio is dead tired from school.
It's nice to have a little brother. I like taking care of him. I help him when he falls.
Elmer carries his brother the whole way to the edge of the gorge. The children cannot take the zipline without their father. They're not strong enough to pull themselves to the other side in case of an emergency.
Dad! Dad!
Hi, boys. How are you? How was school?
There are 2 cables strung across the gorge. The cable for the way back starts a little higher up and is thicker. Here, all 3 of them can fly together. But to do so, the father would need to hold on to both of the boys at the same time. Like on the way there, Elmer flies with his own pulley. Little Porfirio's father fastens him to his own body with a piece of cloth. Made it. After one of the world's most dangerous journeys to and from school, Elmer and his little brother are back safe at home.
Hi, Aunt. Hi, Uncle. Hi, Mom.
Tonight, the family will perform the Pachamama ritual. Once a year, the coca farmers from the neighborhood get together and pray to Mother Earth, their supreme deity. They give thanks for their gifts and ask for a good harvest, happiness, and health. The boy's father, Porfirio, builds a kind of altar with various offerings. Helen and Mariela wish simply to make it back home again. It was a long day for the sisters. They have been on their feet for 13 hours. The girls' feet and knees ache. It's 5 p.m. The sun will go down soon. It gets pitch dark quickly in the forest. Then the girls wouldn't be able to see where they're going anymore. They could get lost or fall down the slope. The girls are exhausted. With their last bit of strength, they make it to the summit of the mountain. They are home.
Hi, Mom.
Hi. Relax a little bit.
The day ends with a modest dinner. The girls are tired but happy.
I'm hot. And I'm exhausted. But tomorrow we'll take the same path. Like every day.
The girls always keep their goal in mind, to get an education for a better life, far from the mountain and from poverty. At the Pachamama ritual, 7-year-old Elmer prays for a good and happy future, when he will be an engineer one day. Elmer's father drizzles pure alcohol on the motley collection of offerings. Herbs, llama wool, tinsel, and figurines made of sugar. Later, the family will bury the ashes in the ground. In that way, they send their offerings and their wishes to Mother.
We all know it. Walked it every day. But none of them were like these. The world's most dangerous ways to school. Freezing, climbing,
risking their lives, all for the chance of a better future. Spectacular and sometimes simply beautiful. The world's most dangerous ways to school. The Bajo Cauca region in northern Colombia. Its landscape is marked by water and seemingly endless expanses. Every day, the children who live there face this rough, unpredictable wilderness with just one goal in mind: making it to school. Because this is their chance to break out of poverty and create a better life. For this, they subject themselves to a daily dose of danger. Some of them must cross a ramshackle bridge that could collapse at any moment. Others are confronted with waters and bogs. Each day they carry not only a backpack, but also the fear of coming face to face with a dangerous animal. For the De Ojos family, the day starts at 4:30 in the morning. While daughter Candice is still sleeping, Father Salvador and Mother Yaciris prepare breakfast. Like most people in this region, they live with very meager means. In this small wooden hut, they have just enough money for food. All the more reason why the 28-year-old mother wants to give her children the chance to have a better life. With the sunrise at 6 o'clock, Yaciris wakes her daughter, Candice. Like almost every morning, the 10-year-old doesn't have much time. Lessons will begin in just 2 hours. Kindy School is far away, and getting there is a major undertaking. There is no running water. The people who live here use collected rain and river water for cooking, laundry, and washing themselves. Kendi's 11-year-old sister goes to the high school in the next bigger village of Kuturu, 20 kilometers away. The parents taught their 2 daughters what school is at an early age.
I like to go to school. I learn a lot there.
Her teacher promotes the talents of the individual students. For Candice, it's painting.
This is from a movie we watched. The man had to collect the stones, and when someone touches the stones, they turn to gold.
About 50 families live in the community of La Vereda La Escuela. To get from A to B, the residents mainly use motorcycles or boats, or they have to walk, like Candice and the other school children.
The roads are very bad. It's super slippery. When it rains hard, we don't even go to school.
The distance and the path across a dangerous bridge are enough of a challenge for the children, in addition to the heat and high humidity, which make walking difficult. Just past 6:30 in the morning, Kendi sets off. Her mother joins her on the first leg of the journey to school. Temperatures are already around 32 degrees Celsius. But this is the least of Kendi's problems. What she's thinking about now is the bridge she has to cross. Living just a half-hour away from her by boat, the school day starts differently for Kendi's classmate. 10-year-old Juan Carlos lives on his grandparents' farm.
I like horseback riding best, but I also like to drive the cows in. Those ones over there. I know all of them by name. When I call them, they come.
Like almost every morning, Juan has to bring the cows in from the pasture. It is not uncommon here for children to grow up with relatives. Juan's mother doesn't make enough money to raise 2 kids, so she decided to keep her younger son with her and send Juan to his grandparents. While Juan drives the last cows in, his grandfather, Jorge, begins with the milking. As a result of selling milk and cheese, he is among the better earners in the region. From his perspective, the fact that his grandson has to help does have its advantages.
He's learning how to care for the cows. For example, how to give them medication and help with birthing.
After half an hour, Juan returns with the cows. He still has 1.5 hours before class starts, exactly the time he needs to get to school. He's usually the last to arrive.
Sometimes I have to let the ducks out and feed the chicks. Then I shower and go.
Even if Juan is late and has to hurry, breakfast is important. The physical work makes Juan hungry, and there's still a tough road ahead. To make sure he has enough strength, he eats rice, eggs, cheese, and avena, an oat drink. Juan doesn't have to cross the rickety bridge like Kendi's does, but he faces his own challenges.
I have to go on a canoe, and it can tip over very easily. And then there's a spot where I'm up to my chest in the water.
That's why Juan puts his school uniform in his backpack and changes into it later. Grandmother Ana Maria always finds it difficult to see her grandson off.
Chao. Mírame, chao. Me da mucha tristeza.
I'm very sad when I see him go away.
Hacia allá.
And rightly so. There are many dangers lurking along the 1.5-hour walk to school. River currents, swamps, poisonous animals, and the rising heat. Candice and her mother Yasiris are only a few meters away from the bridge. Class starts in just an hour. After strong rains, they have to leave even earlier in the morning, because then the road is especially slippery and muddy.
The bridge is the most dangerous part of the way to school. Anything could happen at any time, both on the way there and back. It's the hardest part.
Without the bridge, it would take Candice yet another hour to get to school. The children are never allowed to cross the decaying wooden construction alone. If anything should happen, someone else needs to be able to get help. This is why the 10-year-old meets her classmates, Andrea, Nivea, and Neidi at the bridge. Yes, this bridge. 180 meters long, 4 meters high. The footbridge is made of thin, rotting tree trunks that are only loosely connected. One false step, and they're certain to fall into the smelly water. The children could seriously injure themselves, or even drown.
I'm afraid I'm going to fall down and break my foot or my hand. It's always dangerous to cross the bridge.
From the very first step, the children have to keep their concentration. With every day and each downpour, the bridge becomes more unstable.
I'm afraid the children might fall, and if the wood breaks, they could drown or break their legs. I'm tortured with worry the whole day.
The nearest hospital is 2 hours away, and treatment would be expensive. The children have only one thought: to cross the wooden bridge safely. The wooden bridge their parents built for them to shorten their way to school. Kendi's father, Salvador, helped to build the bridge. Like 90% of the villagers, he has no permanent work. He does odd jobs like working in the fields or fishing, with which he earns the equivalent of just 280 euros a month. 2 years ago, it wasn't possible to move so freely. The guerrilla movement FARC had the area firmly in its grip. It fought against the government and its supporters. The population still suffers from the consequences, but is trying to get their lives back.
To really make a living, I'd need at least 10 fish like this a day. That doesn't happen very often. Fishing alone is not enough to pay for my daughter's education. It's just enough to feed us every day.
Although the state schools are free of charge, the families still have to pay for books, school uniforms, and travel expenses. Salvador wants his daughters to have a better life. That's why he and his wife put every cent into their children and into their dreams. Juan has to hurry. He left the house way too late today.
Now I have to cross the river in a canoe. I'm always afraid it'll tip over.
The canoe is extremely wobbly. One wrong move, and Juan would be sitting in the water, together with his school uniform and books. Juan learned to canoe 2 years ago from a man working for his grandfather. Besides the horses, the canoe is Juan's grandparents' only means of transportation. If they need a dugout canoe during the day, the boy has to swim home in the afternoon with his school supplies in his backpack, which is why a lot of his things have broken. Juan will have to walk for half an hour. As close as it is to the equator, the climate is almost constant throughout the year, hot and muggy. Due to the high humidity, it often rains at night. The ground becomes very soft, which means Juan has to work that much harder.
Now I have to put my backpack on my head. Sometimes the water goes all the way up to here.
The mud causes a lot of trouble for him. Juan can't see where he's stepping in the murky water. It's only 50 meters to the shore, but those 50 meters are what he's most afraid of. Meanwhile, Candice and her friends continue to confront their own fears. They still have a good 70 meters ahead of them. 70 meters along which anything could happen at any time.
Friends of mine have already fallen down and hurt themselves.
Especially in the places where there's no railing, Candy's heart pumps that much faster. It's even more unstable here. One basic rule is never step on the same trunk as someone else. If a trunk breaks and one child falls in the water, at least the other will be able to go for help. While the children are still fighting to get over the bridge, their teacher arrives at school. Yuri's journey with a motorcycle taxi begins Mondays at midnight. Over the weekend, she always travels to her hometown of Medellin, 7 hours away. About 2 years ago, the government rebuilt the school. During the week, it's Yuri's home. It's a small chamber with no windows and no daylight, but Yuri tries to make the best of it.
It's my calling to be a teacher. If you don't feel called, you can't deal with it. There are tons of mosquitoes in my room. In the beginning, there was nothing. I had to bring everything from Medellin. It was really hard for me. There was no TV, no mattress, no blanket. It's difficult every time.
2 years ago, Yuri got one of the few permanent jobs available for teachers. It was a big shock when she learned where she was placed. Now, she has made it her goal to spread knowledge in remote places like this.
It's a big challenge. I'm afraid for my students. I don't feel calm because there's always something that could happen. They could drown or hurt themselves. The bridge is really difficult for the children.
Yuri now has a good half an hour of worrying until the first children begin to arrive. Candice and her friends will soon have made it, if all goes well. The closer they get to the shore, the faster they go, and even forget the most important rule, to keep their distance from each other. They can't get over the bridge fast enough. Ten-year-old Neidi has an especially difficult struggle. She suffers from a fear of heights. With every step, the feeling of dizziness rises, forcing her to her knees. Neidi's friends cannot wait for her together at one place. The danger of collapse is too great. After about half an hour, the first ones finally make it. They have solid ground under their feet once again. The children's exhaustion and relief is noticeable. It's not just the intense concentration, but also the heat and humidity that are tiring. 30 minutes in the blazing sun over a wobbly wooden bridge. It's become a part of everyday life, but it is something they will never get used to.
I'm relieved because nothing happened and nobody got hurt.
Class starts in just a half hour. There is still a long walk ahead, but the most difficult part is now behind them. For Juan, the most dangerous part is yet to come.
I'm afraid of the stingrays. If they sting you, you can die. I have to be careful. They bury themselves in the mud.
A stingray sting can be fatal or cause serious injury, but this is the only way to get to school. Mission accomplished. Without meeting a stingray, without getting the backpack and school supplies wet.
I am relieved because I have the mud and the water behind me now.
Finally, Juan can put on his dry school uniform. Class starts in 20 minutes. Although he already knows he's going to be late again, he's glad that he can go to school at all. It brings him a little closer to his dream of moving to a big city. Kendis, Nevea, Andrea, and Neidi have been on the road for over an hour now. Unlike Juan, at least they're not alone, which makes time go by faster. The temperature is already 34 degrees Celsius at 7:45 in the morning, with humidity at 97%.
It's really super hot while walking.
We have to protect ourselves from the sun.
If we get too hot.
And when we go home in the afternoon, it's even hotter.
Even while they are walking to school, they are already thinking about the way back. Even hotter, and over the wooden bridge again. If the children are lucky, an adult will pick them up on a motorcycle after school. But they won't know until school's out at 1 o'clock. The last 15 minutes are the hardest. The temptation to just sit in the shade is great.
Okay, let's go.
They know the reason they're making such a great effort. To learn things that will help make their dreams of a good job come true. Juan will soon arrive as well. He gets up his strength for the last stretch.
The most difficult part is the hill we just passed and the one coming up.
To pass the time, Juan practices doing calculations in his head. Math is his favorite subject. After 1.5 hours, Kendis and her friends have finally made it. Just before 8 o'clock, the blue roof of the school appears behind the last hill. This sight alone gives them a shot of energy. The classmates who live a little closer are already there, A total of 15 children between the ages of 6 and 10 go to the school. Education is compulsory in Colombia for 9 years, but only 85% of children actually go to school. Juan finally arrives shortly after 8. Even though he has to take an arduous road, he likes school. For him, it's a welcome change from the hard life on the farm.
Yo les enseño, Señor Jesús, te damos gracias por este día de vida que nos das. Te damos gracias por nuestras familias, en el nombre de Jesús. Amén.
Today, the subject of means of communication is part of the curriculum.
Computers.
In addition to general knowledge, the children are taught math, Spanish, art, religion, and sports. The school only gets textbooks through donations. Teacher Yuri buys most of the classroom materials using her meager salary of 350 euros a month. The teacher faces the same challenge every day, teaching 6 different levels, from preschool to 5th grade, all at the same time.
It's very difficult to teach like this. Why? Because I look for a topic that is good for everyone. Then I assign a task that everyone can do, and then another one that is appropriate to the level. This means the tasks have different degrees of difficulty.
2 years ago, most of the children wrote very poorly and came to school irregularly. Yuri is proud that that has changed. Her students really like to go to school now. But there's still one problem. The children arrive exhausted.
They are often tired and have trouble concentrating. But I try to teach things that are fun for the children and where they have to actively participate. I know the circumstances. They don't have it easy, but I always tell them that the effort and learning will pay off in the future.
After 3 hours, the children have a 45-minute break. They can rest and get something to eat. Sometimes the parents bring something to their kids during the lunch break, but most of them get a break box.
Before I get here, I eat breakfast. And my grandma always gives me something to eat because there's no cafeteria here.
After lunch, there's still time to play. Something Juan doesn't get to do much at home. Here, he can finally be a child. And the fun continues in gym class. The kids love it. They can stop thinking and just goof around. Shortly before 1 o'clock, the end of the lesson approaches, and thus, also the trip back home.
I'm always a little afraid of going back because it's so hot there. And if you go into the water when you're that heated, you can get a shock and drown.
Candice hopes that her father, Salvador, has time to pick her up with a motorcycle today. It's also not particularly safe, but at least it's better than the wooden bridge. The teacher lets her young charges go, but with mixed feelings. She knows that today she has brought them one step closer to their dreams, but she also knows the trials and tribulations that lie ahead. Candice and her friend Andrea are lucky. Salvador is already waiting. He can't always pick them up. It depends on whether he or his wife need the motorcycle for something else. It's their only means of transport. The two girls are happy when someone picks them up, although the ride on the motorcycle is also not without its risks.
When it rains, I'd rather walk. When it's so wet, it's easy to slip and get badly hurt.
Yes, the muddy roads are the most difficult. You have to be very careful when driving here. You have to make sure not to slip in the mud. There are also a lot of buffalo here that destroy the ground. It's also very difficult for the kids, and you really have to watch out.
In the morning, it is often too wet and muddy to drive the children safely. By the afternoon, the sun has dried the ground, at least a little bit. Although the people here are very good drivers, there are accidents every day on the bad roads. They slide, fall, and can seriously hurt themselves. The good thing is that it only takes 30 minutes to get back by motorbike. Juan has just completed a quarter of the way. The midday heat is getting to him. 38 degrees Celsius, no wind, and the water supply is limited. Only the trees provide a bit of shade. Juan's grandparents are waiting for him and get worried if he comes home too late. But they also know he takes a break on the way home and therefore takes a little longer.
I like the car in the tree. It's nice and shady here, and cooler, especially in the afternoon, when the sun is even hotter after school. I take a break here. Sometimes I use the leaves as a sunblock. They give me a little shade.
After the short break, Juan goes step by step toward the section of the route he is most afraid of. It's almost 2 in the afternoon. The 10-year-old has been on his feet for 9 hours, and now he has to go back through the water with those dangerous creatures. But there's one thing on his way home he is looking forward to. His favorite place on the river. While Juan still has an hour's walk ahead of him, the others approach their destination after a half-hour ride. Mother Yasiris is relieved to have her youngest back again, and all in one piece.
I'm glad to be home. Now I'll relax and then do my homework.
She enjoys watching TV after school with her 11-year-old sister, Karin. After that, homework calls. Mother Yasiris helps her daughters. She recently returned to school and graduated herself. She has no vocational training. For that, she would have to move to another city and leave her family. But she doesn't want that.
Mona Lisa es una obra pictórica del pintor renacentista italiano Leonardo da Vinci.
So it's all the more important to her that her 2 girls are able to make their dreams come true. Meanwhile, Juan has arrived at the river. He still has to cross it, but then he is home. Although he's late, there's one thing he's not going to miss today. Juan loves to swim in a river without dangerous animals.
The water's so nice and cool, and I can relax a little bit. I can swim fast.
One canoe trip later, and he is finally at home. Exhausted after a very long day. His grandparents and his work are already waiting for him.
I feel very relieved when he comes home, and nothing has happened. I'm also proud of him when he brings home good marks.
I'm glad to be here and not have to go through the mud and the water anymore. I'm really relieved.
In the late afternoon, Candice gets together again with her friends. Before they go to bed, the family spends some time together.
I'm very happy when they get home, because every trip to school and back is dangerous.
Even though Candice is afraid of going to school every day, she knows it's the only chance she has to achieve her career aspirations.
I want to be a great artist. I love to paint. I love painting landscapes.
For this, she goes up against the shaky, rotting wooden bridge every day. She's sure that this is how her dreams will become reality. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Juan is finished with all his tasks. Even though his grandparents are very strict, they do give him support.
I hope that Juan will become an engineer, like my sons. He shouldn't end up as a field worker or a fisherman. I always tell him he has to study.
I want to go to Medellin and study there. I want to be an engineer.
In order to get closer to their wishes and dreams, Juan and the other children from the village La Veridad La Escuela have to go to school for the next few years on one of the world's most dangerous ways to school.